right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, right. So I'm just talk about the jump for 15 minutes, and then hopefully we'll hear from some other people about how this has kind of already started to kind of hit the ground in some existing CECs. But so in terms of who I am, like I've spent the last 15 years working in the environment movement in various different ways. Started off as a green energy engineer and scientist around climate change stuff. Worked in the private sector for 10 years. Helping governments, businesses, cities take action on climate change. Lived and worked in the US and China and the UK. And then the last 5 or 6 years, I was head of research at an NGO called C40. Some of you may know it. And I've recently left that, as we'll talk a bit more about in a minute, after some research that we did that showed the gaping holes in how we're all kind of approaching taking action on climate change. And that's where me and a bunch of others left to set up the jump. I also did sort of supported the Labour Party by writing the technical work behind the Green Industrial Revolution stuff at the last election. So we did a sort of a 300-page technical document that produced all the analysis that sat behind the work that the stuff that we saw at the last election. So that's me, and the jump is something I've been working with others on for a few months now. And I think if I was to summarize it in one sentence, I think, as you see on the image there, less stuff, more joy, I think is our kind of, is the basis of the whole thing, really. And it's what the science says needs to happen. So what actually is the jump? Where does it come from? The origins are in a piece of research, as I mentioned, right, which was done by Leeds University, Arup, a British consultancy, and C40 CECs, the NGO I used to work for. $1.5 million, year and a half piece of research that was the most comprehensive I've seen of its nature, that looked at the whole of the world's economy, where we are today and where we need to get to, right? And it looked at where everything is produced all around the world, taking an analysis of the entire globe's trade flow, and where everything's produced and where it's consumed. And so you can start to see the full shape of the economy and what needs to change to get to where we're going. And the findings were absolutely, they shocked me to my core, okay, and many others. And as a result, the jump is a product of that. And so this is just to reassure you all that this is, it's the result of some world-leading climate science that sits behind this. And what did it say? Well, basically, it showed that there is no hope of addressing climate change without looking at the global impact of consumption, particularly of the wealthiest, right? And it showed that basically, to have any hope of stopping climate change, we need a 2/3 reduction in the impact of consumption by by basically the 1.5 billion middle classes around the world in just 10 years. Okay, so that's the impact of the food, clothes we buy, the cables in our electric wires, everything that's consumed by businesses, governments, and individuals. Okay, and stuff that is consumed here, but maybe produced all around the world. So if I buy a phone, a smartphone, that will have had materials will have been mined and produced in all sorts of places, and then taken to somewhere for manufacture, the different components, then move somewhere else, and then finally end up in your hand. You'll have had a global impact by buying that phone. And so this is what we mean when we say consumption. Okay? And so this is a number to have in our heads, right? 10 years, 2/3 reduction. That's enormous reduction, very quick. And that implies a massive change in the way our society works, right? And when you approach this, you go, okay, well, so if we're thinking about that 2/3 reduction, where in the world now looks like that future that we're talking about? And so if you think, well, where are the leading sustainable places? Okay, where are the places that have really scaled ambitious climate action? And the things that pop to mind are places like Copenhagen, Oslo, Portland, these places where they've had 40 years of really good hard work on reducing their emissions. They've got almost completely renewable energy efficient buildings, very, very high cycling and walking, lots of green space, a huge amount to be extremely proud of, okay? And when you look at those places, you sort of see that, for instance, Copenhagen, okay, their emissions, their local emissions, the emissions that they emit within Copenhagen are down to 2 tons a person. Okay, now 2 tons a person is all. Well, we need to get to 1 ton. Okay, globally, per person to be able to keep carbon budgets met, stay within carbon budgets. In London, it's about 7 tons. So Copenhagen has done a great amount of hard work, and that should be massively applauded. And that is why it's the model that almost everywhere is trying to copy. If you look at a climate change action plan for Bristol, or for for England, for all of the work that's going on, is basically trying to copy this model: green energy, energy efficient buildings, etc. But when you then look at the global impact of someone in Copenhagen, it goes from 2 tons local to 20 tons global. Okay, so that is astronomically beyond anything that's even remotely sustainable or within carbon budgets. So our most sustainable places that embody the kind of direction we're all working in are, that is not what the future looks like. That is utter climate Armageddon. Okay, and what this shows us is that better technology and better policy won't be enough. It's important. We need to do that. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't do what's happening in Copenhagen, but that's just a step on the journey. Okay. So all the wind turbines in the world and all the electric buses will not prevent catastrophic climate change. They're an important part, but they're not enough. And that's as long as we're addicted. The reason is there's this addiction to stuff because people in Copenhagen tend to be very rich, fly lots, redo their houses every couple of years, lots of meat consumption, investments abroad, all sorts of stuff like that. And so as long as our society remains completely, the focus of our society is the accumulation of more and more stuff, more and more wealth, more and more GDP, it is impossible to address to stay within carbon budgets. Now, for you guys, this might sound like it's obvious, right? And it's kind of like we all kind of know this, we feel it in our hearts. But this is the first time this has been put in analytically quantified proof that it's not enough just to come up with fancy technologies. Okay, and that's a complete revelation, right? And so that's the first thing, okay, that which was mind-blowing from this research, because I spent most of my career trying to get governments to come up with better technology and policy, telling them that was enough, and actually it's not. And so how do we address that? Well, what do we do then? How do we start to deal with this? Well, if we're going to get that 2/3 reduction, we looked at in that research all the different interventions that are needed across government, business, citizens, and communities. And as we know, I mean, this is, XR focuses on this. Government and big business has most responsibility, right? But, we need to decarbonize supply chains, green up energy, and so on. But actually, there is an enormous chunk still that citizens and individuals have primary influence over. So if you look at, for instance, London, up to 50% of London's emissions can be mitigated by people living in London. Now, that's actually, it's a bit, and this is not saying it's up to individuals to fix the problem, okay? We need all action from everyone. Government must do everything. Communities must do everything. Business must do everything, okay? To have any hope of staying within carbon budgets, all action from all actors. But what this does is it gives it's an enormously empowering message, right? We do have power, actually, as citizens and communities. We need to hold government to account, but we can actually get on with transforming our society on the ground and in our lives. And so, and the research showed really quickly, we looked at the hundreds of things that need to happen. And of them, 6 of them, so of the things that need to happen that the citizens and individuals have most control over, of them, there are 6 that make up almost all the impact. 6 things that need to happen for all the wealthy people in the world, basically, in the next 10 years. This is what the jump is about. So these 6 shifts. And they describe what the future looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to run through them really quickly. Okay, and you've got the summary there. The first one is end clutter. Keep your products for at least 7 years. So, and it's not always easy because your iPhone's designed to die after a year. But doing your best to not just buy lots of new stuff just because we want it, just because we can, but try and repair things, try and buy things that are more repairable. My laptop that I'm on now, as far as I could tell, was the most repairable laptop on the market. So hopefully I can keep it for longer. So that's the first one, end clutter. Okay? The enormous impact of producing all those electronics and all those products, and that impact is enormous. So by prolonging that, we have enormously positive impact. The next one, travel well. So if you can get rid of your private vehicles, I mean, and that's not always possible for everyone. Not everyone's as mobile for all sorts of reasons, or we live in the countryside. So in that case, it's maybe just get down to as few private vehicles as possible, because of the enormous impact of producing vehicles, right? So like the idea that we're just going to move from diesel and petrol cars to electric cars, that is not a viable environmental option. We need less cars on the road. We need less cars existing. And so we're moving to put, walking, cycling, public transport, car sharing, those sorts of options. Third is eat healthy. So as you probably all know, this is the single biggest impact of any sector, basically. And there's three elements of this. Going to a plant-based diet as close as possible, maximum of 16 kilograms of meat a year, 90 kilograms of dairy a year, but going as close to plant-based as you can. Don't waste any food, so eat everything you buy, and try not to eat too much, because 3 times as many people die from eating too much as those who die from malnutrition and not having enough food. And all of that unnecessary food has an enormous environmental impact. That's number 3. Number 4, this is the one that I've got a 21-year-old sister, and she was she was upset with me after she saw this, because she was really looking forward to going and traveling around and seeing the world. But holidaying local, so one flight every 3 years. Okay, and that's the global convergence point. That's, for many people in the West, that's an enormous reduction. But for most people in India, that's a vast increase. And so the modeling showed that if we converge on this number, then that can stay, it's manageable across the world. Okay, and it says one flight every 3 years short haul, one flight every 8 years long haul. The 5th one is dress fresh. So basically, or dress retro. But not, buying, targeting 3 new items of clothing a year, maximum 8. So rather than going and buying a new T-shirt every weekend, as we're encouraged to at the moment, recycling clothes, second-hand clothes, upcycling, sharing, renting, all sorts of different options, right? For you can still look wonderful. You just don't. It's just not about buying every year, every couple of weeks. And then so that's the first 5, and then the final one, the 6th one, is to recognize, okay, those 5 were things that really, when you look at it, they are changes that must happen, and individuals and communities have primary influence over those things. That you could say that they're actually the responsibility in the end of us as citizens. The last one is change the system. So this is do one thing to nudge all those other things that need to happen out there, to stay within carbon budget. So, whether we're changing our, greening up our investment sector. So for that, we recommend changing to a green pension. In terms of energy, swapping to a green energy supplier. Getting involved in activism, join XR, write a letter. Although obviously not everybody is able to get involved in activism for all sorts of reasons. That's why we have a mix of things here. And if you can afford it, retrofit your home. Retrofitting your home to make it energy efficient is something that needs to happen, but only about 15% of the UK really can afford to do a full home retrofit. It's very expensive. So that's why we don't put it as one of the first 5. So do one thing to nudge the system. And that's your 6, right? And to take the jump is to try these 6 shifts, to have a go at them for 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months. Okay. And 1 month just to get a taste of it, 3 months because the science says that's how long it is to change habits, 6 months. If you do it for 6 months, you've started a new way of life. And I think the powerful thing about this is that finally we know what we need to be doing in our own lives. We often when you're being invited to go to on holiday somewhere, or you're worrying at night, sort of trying to figure out, am I doing the best I can? Every time I open the Guardian, there's another article saying what I've been doing isn't enough, or actually soy milk's really bad for the environment. And it can be really disempowering and really, really alarming to have this constant barrage of information and not knowing what to do. No more confusion. If you take the jump, you know that you are doing the vast majority of what you need to be doing in your own life. So it's clear, it's practical, it's doable, but it is actually really radical in many ways. You'd be surprised at different reactions you get from people. Some people find some bits really easy, and other bits very hard. And just to acknowledge that taking the jump is something we do as individuals, but you can also do it as a community, as a local authority. So Waverley Council recently, a few weeks ago, voted to be the first council to take the jump officially. Bristol and Leeds are hopefully close behind. Institutions, whether it's schools or universities, we've got Leeds University and Bristol University hopefully going to be taking the jump. Industry and businesses, we've got a whole range of businesses in the UK and in America taking the jump. NGOs and environmental organisations. So we have, we'll come more to that in a bit. So that's all well and good, right? You might say, okay, brilliant. Now I've got a list of the things we might want to do. But the whole of the world, whenever you walk out on the street, you have 1,600 adverts every day, the average Westerner, telling you that you're worthless if you don't consume stuff. So how do we help, and trains are expensive, planes are really cheap. Decent organic food is often really expensive. Fried chicken is really cheap. How do we help people do that? We've got two main ways we support people in taking the jump. When you take up the jump, you sign up online and you take the jump, you commit to doing it, or you commit to trying to do it. And then you get all this kind of support to do so. And there's two bits, the foundations and the toolkit. And I'm just going to run through the foundations. These are ways to think about making change based on 30 years of behavior change science that help us approach this change in a way that means it will actually work. Okay, the first, trying is enough. Okay, so even if you can't do all 6, or you can only do 1, or you know that you've got to get on a plane to go see your kids because your family live abroad, it's okay. Just do what you can and start with that, and then see where you can build to. Or if you find out halfway through that you've just got to have that burger because you just love it too much, that doesn't mean it's over. You can keep going. So this is really important, that we don't have this kind of, that we have that flexibility with ourselves, and kindness to ourselves. Related to that is no more us and them, no more shaming, right? And this is something that I'm sure we all know is part of the environment movement, and we feel very passionate about stuff, about the environment, about the change we want to see, and we feel like we want to go out there and tell people they need to be better. And the research is clear; it doesn't work like that. If you shaming people, calling them out for being wrong, very rarely works. What works is supporting people to make their own transition, nurturing and supporting each other. And this is something that we have when all the workshops we do at the jump, all the meetings we come together. This is the first thing we start with: no shaming, support each other. Jump for joy is the next one. I'll come a bit more into this in a minute, but so if the shifts are what we're moving away from, what is the world we're moving to? Okay, we don't have to go back to the Stone Age here. We can still go see the world in our life. Once every 3 years, we could, that still means we can go and see the whole world in our life. We can still look great and eat great food. It's just about focusing on the things that actually make life good. And then same access, different responsibilities is the next one. I might come a bit more into this very briefly later, but the environment movement, as we all know, is mostly, frankly, white middle class people. That has to end. We need to involve all parts of our community and our society in it. But at the same time, we have to be very careful that we're not putting the responsibility for addressing climate change at the door of the people who didn't cause it. So it's this balance between everyone being welcome and involved, but really it's those of us who've been consuming lots, those of us with who are wealthier, we need to take most action. And then taking the jump will change things. So I might skip over this because I'm conscious I'm talking a lot, but this is basically just making sure that the whole theory behind the taking the jump shows how by making these changes in our own lives, we will actually lead to transformative systemic change. So that's the foundation. This is how you approach it. And then the toolkit is how we support people to actually make the jump in their daily lives. And there's 5 tools that are available for anyone taking the jump. Connect, so bringing people together into buddy groups to go on their journey together, forming local community groups, and then connecting people all around the world who are taking the jump so that we could do that journey together. We can support each other, inspire each other, help each other along. Experiment, so all sorts of ways that we can do fun events, music. I mean, the guys in Godalming, as we're here in a bit, did loads of wonderful things around this in their event the other day. Music, comedy, all sorts of things that help us break our habits, right, and start doing something different. Sharing, so spreading this message online, so that if you look at Facebook, most of the stuff you see on Facebook is adverts paid for by BMW and all these. Let's create an alternative story online. Share the life that we're living, which is low consumption and positive, that we're proud of, right? So doing that is really important. Logging and feedback. So we've got a tool that allows people to keep track of how they're doing. And then finally, deepen. So it's a whole set of trainings, workshops, reflections that deal with the inner transition that is required, because it is a big change, this. And what do you do when your friends ask you to get on a flight and you don't want to? There's a whole psychological process you can go through there to help you. So that's the tools that we have to help people. And I just want to delve into one a bit more. And this is the Jump for Joy one, right? And I bring this out because the wonderful folks in Godalming and hopefully soon the also wonderful folks in Guildford will be. This is a core part of what has felt powerful about the jump. Because today, imagine today, when you feel low, you've had a bad day, right? And you want to feel better. What does society offer you as your main way of feeling better? Well, you get out your phone, you go on Amazon and you buy some crap, right? And then you feel great for 10 minutes. You get the endorphin hit. We're physiologically designed to feel great when that happens, okay? But then you feel rubbish again after 10 minutes and you have to keep buying and keep buying. That means you have to keep earning money, and you're in this cycle of consumption which doesn't serve us and which destroys the planet. Okay, well, so what would be, if we're taking the jump and through the 6 shifts, we're going to be consuming less? Well, what does that create space for? And what is the future we actually, if we're jumping away from consumption, what are we jumping to? Okay, and Tim Jackson, a professor at Surrey University, and I don't, if you haven't read Prosperity Without Growth, I'm sure many of you will have done, and his new one, Post Growth, Post Capitalism, I think it's called. Incredible insight into how the future will look, and he describes the future economy as not one that's based on consumption, but one that's based on creativity. And when do you feel better than when you create stuff, or we listen to someone else's creativity, a beautiful song, play, dance, craft, when we make things with our ingenuity and our hard work, whether it's a beautiful garden or a well-delivered class to some children or a beautiful table. Okay, when we put our effort into that, and that's wonderful to do, and it's wonderful to experience. And that's when we really add value in life and in our communities and in the economy, and care. When do you feel better than when you're being cared for? And what is more important in our world than caring for each other? All those carers out there, mothers with or parents for children who aren't compensated in our economy at all. This is the stuff that actually makes our economy work. Why aren't we paying people who are parents just for being parents? This is what Tim Jackson shows. These 3 C's as alternatives to consumption are what the future will be. But actually, that's wonderful. And we started in the jump with focusing on that, as that's the future we're jumping to. But then in the sessions we've held, all sorts of other C's have been coming out. All sorts of other wonderful things that describe our future. Camaraderie, when you have fun with your friends. But what is better than that? When do you feel better than when you're doing that? Okay. Comedy. Literally, have you ever felt, when you have side-splitting laughter, and you can barely breathe? That's literally the best time in your whole life, isn't it? You don't have to pay anyone. You don't have to consume anything. Collaboration, when you work together with people to do something, to make something wonderful, and you all support each other on that journey. Literally, the science shows that is one of the most heightened. There's one of the most heightened possibilities for being happy is in that situation. Contentment, just reading a book. Me in this wonderful field, I feel as content as anything. I didn't have to pay anyone for this. Connection, when you just look at the stars, or when you learn something about your history or about who you are, about the people around you, you feel wonderful. And when you celebrate, so there's a whole bunch of C's, right, that describe what the future looks like. And taking the jump is about trying to nurture those, writing a new song, coming together as a community to do something fun. And because we're consuming less, hopefully that creates more space for doing that. And we can hear a bit more about practically what that might look like in a minute. So that's what the jump is really in its core, is doing those things. And I've only got a slide or 2 more, I think. But who are we talking about with the jump? And this is a really important question, as all of us in the environment movement, we've been in this space for a while, and we've kind of been in this little 13% of the population who have been engaged for a long time, talking to ourselves and each other. We need to get beyond that group, don't we? We need to reach the 50. There's 25% or so of people that, I don't know if you've seen this research, Britain Talks climate research, shows that if you put the population here, you've got half that will never be involved off their own back. You have to change the world around them, okay, and the Daily Mail readers and whatnot. Then you've got the other half, you split up into 13% who are really engaged and have been engaged, and that's basically where the environment movement's been active. But then you've got this chunk in the middle, 25 to 30%, who can't sleep at night and are worried about climate change, they're worried about the future of their kids, but don't want to tie themselves, they don't want to get involved in activism, don't see themselves as environmentalists or greenies, but can be engaged if we just put the right language on around this, and just the right framing, empower them in their own lives. Okay, and that is the community that we're trying to reach out to the jump. And this is why the CECs are so exciting. If we can, a potential to reach communities around the country using a different approach. And then finally, diversity. So at its heart, so we're engaging with the Black Allies Network and Anti-Oppression Circle to do lots of work in BIPOC communities, disadvantaged communities around the UK. We've got a big event coming up in Leeds at the moment with Black and Brown community leaders helping us organise all sorts of events in Leeds to try and express this in a way which is attractive and interesting to different communities. So, second last slide. What does this mean for CECs? And we'll hear a bit more from the other guys in a bit, but just some ideas around this. Here's some photos from the wonderful event we had in Godalming the other day. Godalming's taken the jump. And here's some of the sorts of things that pop up as being potential exciting things. So the first is experimenting with the Jump for Joy thing. At the Godalming, we had comedy, we had music, we had the wonderful song by David, who wrote his own Take the Jump song. We had all sorts of different music talks. We had workshops for kids, storytelling stuff. It was wonderful. Okay, so when we talked about those different C's, that we can start to embody them in our towns and remind people they don't require anything. Don't need to go on Amazon for them. Physical spaces. I mean, the power of having a place where people could come and connect with these simple messages and feel like they can engage with it. Ben might talk a bit more about that in a minute. Citizens assembly. So that connection of maybe a community that's focused on these clear guidance we have now on what the 6 shifts and what we need to do. Citizen assemblies to help think about how we do that. How can we embody that in our local community? That could be a wonderful combination. Buddy groups. I mean, this is something I mentioned very briefly earlier, but it is at the core of the jump. Bringing people together locally to start to embody the future and take the jump as groups, supporting each other. So you've got someone you can ring up with when you're sat about to get that steak and you're like, oh, I really want it. And I've been in this position many times, on that close to having, and then, you can speak to someone who's in your buddy group and they can just remind you what you're doing and why you don't want to do that. Training. So this is what we're doing in Leeds with a commitment, with community groups in Leeds, is training the trainers, activating local, change makers, training them in how to activate their community and talk about the jump, talk about change and make them feel positive about that. And then all sorts of ways to engage the local community. And what that does is that basically means that I described earlier, Copenhagen is not what the future looks like. It is in some ways, but that is not what the future looks like. And we don't have anywhere around the world we can point to that looks like it right now at scale. But how on earth are we going to be able to address this issue until we have those examples? And by doing this on the ground, catalyzing this kind of change, we start to create real examples of what the future looks like. And it's the necessary and completely absent first step. And it's literally the most powerful thing I can imagine for changing the world. In terms of support we can provide, we've got all sorts of materials. We've got great posters. We've got videos. We've got all sorts of other stuff we could talk about in a bit. But here's some examples of the kinds of content we have that we can help people with, whether it's creating physical spaces or social media campaigns or whatever. And so, yeah, we could talk more about all that. But yeah, that's us. Let's take the jump. Any questions would be very welcome. And also Shirley, David and Ben, any thoughts?
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. That was brilliant. Just on one of those C's, I've just been crafting. I'm turning my mum's old scarves into curtains. So that's what I've been doing while you've been chatting. Quick tabs on them. Okay, should we just have quick some feed, just Ben and David and Shirley. I don't know who wants to chat first. Can you stop the share screen, Tom? So everyone, perfect. If you just want to just feedback some of what your ideas and what you've been doing, in terms of using them in Guildford and Godalming, as Tom would say, or Godalming.
I know, it's so cute, isn't it? Godalming. Anyway, I'll go briefly first, just to say, the combination of things is very nice. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. The work behind Take the Jump is very good. There are some refinements in the phrases, but that's a long conversation. People were confused by certain of the volunteers came back after the event and said, "Oh, you know, dress fresh. Is that really what we mean?" And then but getting different groups involved with something that they care about. So we had Godalming Cycle Campaign come for the travel well, and they care about that, and so they were just brilliant. They had speakers and interviews, and they had lovely ideas about how to travel more by bicycle. They were just, but it's their thing. So what I looked for in our thing was people who want to come and do their thing as part of Take the Jump, not a different thing. So it's something they're already passionate about, but we're weaving it all together, but that also takes the burden off the organisers, because you can't do everything. You know, we had 15 different stalls there in Godalming. Due to COVID, one didn't run at all because, you know, somebody was pinged and couldn't run that tent. But I think it comes out of the people who you've got. You know, you nurture something, and I think this was Phoenix's advice about the CECs, is that you give people an opportunity to do what they already care about, and then that has a buzz around it, and you're not pushing them, you're inviting them, but then that gets you your buzz and your support, and then that will be attractive to this group perhaps that Tom talks about. I don't know what brings people in, that's still a question, but people doing what they loved was easy to manage and lovely to see. And infrastructure things are a little bit harder. We had help from Godalming Town Council. They put up 2 gazebos, 1 massive gazebo, but everything else we had to do ourselves, you know, all the other things. And putting up the signs, we didn't get them up. You know, we should have planned to have them the day before, and we just didn't get them set up. So those are things we've learned. But would I do it again? Too right, tomorrow morning. And we've got a few more plans for inside out. So if I just say a little bit more, inside our CEC, we're going to cover every aspect of Take the Jump regularly. So it'll be come and see. So that's all I'll say for now. David, Ben?
I'll say something a bit about. I took on the Jump for Joy part of it, really, that Tom referred to, and we saw that as being sort of the hub around where everything else would sit. So you've got all the different bits of information and things going on around the stalls. But what we envisaged the Jump for Joy bit doing, which was just a marquee set up like a stage, was to create a continuity through the day and also link the whole thing together. So we had lots of those C's that Tom talked about there, in terms of we had a lot of music there. A lot of it was music that had been written originally or had been contributed to in different ways. And so we had different local artists and different local groups come along, but we also brought in comedy. We brought in dancing, which we'll have to think about how to get a C into it somehow or other.
Cavorting.
Cavorting, there you go, cavorting, excellent, very good, very good. So we had cavorting, but in amongst all of that, what we then did was we spliced in each stall having someone come up and talk about that part of what they were doing. So the idea was that through that, the entertainment, we got people there listening to the music and that, and then they would hear about, go to the Godalming Cycle Campaign. They'll tell you about travel well and go around the front, and they'll talk about eat healthy. So it was all integrated together, but it became then a continuous, essentially a continuous performance through the day with all those elements in it. And created that lovely focal point, which is what we wanted, and we think it was quite entertaining. I certainly had a good time running the whole thing. It was great fun, but it was very much giving it created the connection between the whole thing. It gave it that focus. So that's all I'll say about that. I'm quite happy to share more about that sort of stuff, and also we do a lot of stuff and that sort of thing, and sharing resources with you. Tom mentioned we wrote a song specifically about Take the Jump called The Impact of Our Lives, and I've turned it into a little bit of a video and I'm quite happy to let people have that Creative Commons sort of stuff, give people the music, and you can go off and play it yourselves and all this sort of stuff. Or we'll come and play it for you. That's always an alternative. Ben, over to you.
Yes, David. Hi, yeah, I'm Ben from Guildford. So we're sort of, I was hoping to have something to sort of demonstrate, but we've had a bit of a problem with our lease that's only just been resolved, really. So we don't actually have anything physical to do at the moment. But what we're doing is building a magic wall, for want of a better word, whereby one of our tech guy, we're going to have the 6 shifts on the wall, the 6 shifts of the jump, and then you can effectively touch this wall, which we're making to look quite fancy, and it will expand out into a subsection of each of the shifts, which has some sort of local solution to go along with it. So, for example, under change of system, we will have a bit on banking, and we'll lay out why investing with one of the main 5 high street banks is a terrible idea climate-wise. And then we'll offer other options. So obviously Triodos will go in there, but we'll also put local things in there, like Boom, which is a Sussex and Surrey credit union that uses your savings to help people that have got bad credit and can't get funding. So you're actually kind of giving something back to help the local community that way. So we're going to do that for all 6 of them. It looks like, fingers crossed, we might be getting the keys to the building pretty soon. I said that 2 months ago when I was on here as well, and it's still not happened. But it seems like, we got an email yesterday that seems like it's now finally going through, which was super annoying because it came down to like loose tiles on the floor that's got asbestos below it. So my solution is let's just put a desk over it, basically. And even that's taken 2 weeks to resolve. But that's off on a tangent anyway. So that will be the thing in the building. So we'll actually be able to have like a physical equivalent of what you get from the jump online, but tailored to local solutions. And then we've chatted to Tom about sort of like setting up the local Facebook group so that, you know, someone from the jump and someone from our CEC has access to it, so that the jump can manage who's actually doing stuff and we can manage the more community side aspect of it. So that's like the sort of physical manifestation, I suppose, of how this might work online. We're going to video all of this from like literally having a couple of sheets of ply into how you can do all this. So that, I guess that will kind of be like a tutorial that other CECs can use that we'll try and make. And I'm sure we'll get some of it wrong, so we'll adapt it, and then people can sort of learn from our mistakes or what have you. And then the other thing that we're looking to do, number one, we're kind of going to pinch Shirley and David's event from Godalming, and we're like actually neighbours, Godalming and Guildford. But we're also going to do something at the cathedral during Great Big Green Week. So we're pretty lucky in that Tim Jackson, who Tom was quoting earlier, actually is based at the University of Surrey, which is in Guildford. So we're kind of pretty lucky with having CUSP, which is like a pretty well-renowned post-growth economics department. So I think what we're going to try and do is on the Sunday of that, which is the day after this, we're going to do similar to what David and Shirley did throughout the town, and hopefully we'll have the keys to our CEC, so we can kind of lead people through the 6 shifts so they finish in the CEC to come and see what it's all about. But the day before, we're going to try and build this event hopefully with the uni on board, to try and like focus it around the different types of things that we can build into a new type of economy, with a particular focus on care economy, I think. But yeah, if we can get CUSP involved in that I think that would be pretty good way to go around it. And then so Tom's one of the workshops they ran in Leeds, which, sorry I was late, I might have missed this bit, but was around workshop with people's relationship with consumerism. So I think that's a really sort of important thing to build into it. And then we're going to have music, comedy going on at the cathedral, possibly a giant bathtub, which is going around the country apparently at the moment with Affinity Water. So just having a load of different things like that, get a load of the local sort of craft things going. And I think just try and like build, like, as I say, going back to collaboration, that's kind of everything that we're trying to do here, isn't it? So really have a big focus on that. So yeah, that's going to be 25th of September. So we'll see if we can document some of that. But yeah, if people are up for doing the interactive wall, then I think that's something that would work pretty well in almost any CEC, really, tweaked to what you can actually put in there locally, because obviously that's going to be almost impossible for the jump gang to do, because you know you can't physically really do that from a central position. So yeah, if there's a way that obviously everyone can interact with Tom to figure out how, you know, what the limitations are and what you can do locally with tweaking it for your own scenario and your own community, I think it's a really good way to start connecting with your communities there. yeah, I'll be back when we've made it, and hopefully not too long from now I can give everybody a bit of a working demo from inside the CEC. But yeah, hopefully not another 2 months from now.
Wonderful.
Ruth, shall I pass back to you?
Lovely. Thank you, Ben. I'm just aware of the time. Is everybody happy? Because we haven't had questions yet. Are you happy to do another 10 minutes? So you've got a chance to ask questions, and yeah, everyone happy? Brilliant. Before you, I just wanted to say, for me, as a psyche kind of person, I love those C's. I thought that was the bit that was really revolutionary for me, because we actually work on approach goals. When you tell people to stop eating because they need to go on a diet, or stop taking drugs, or stop smoking, or whatever, that's not how we work. We work when we move towards something that we want. So it's actually a really good way to start thinking about how to organize your CEC and planning what you have in it. All that stuff around creativity and craft and joy. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that because it was a researchy based thing that I know about. Okay, who's got questions? Anybody over to everybody else for Tom, David, Shirley, and Ben? Glynis.
Got a little bit of a problem. In Swindon, the council, well, it's not really a problem because they've started a thing called Be the Change, which is the same 6 things you've got. And, you know, we're already kind of working on that. And we're also, I do Transition Swindon, and, you know, it's all the same kind of message, really. And by the way, I don't think I want to jump. I should take a leisurely stroll, if you don't mind. Just saying. Anyway, but I do all those things anyway, so that's fine. But I like the way you're kind of doing it. I'm just worried that they're calling it the hub is if they're doing jump and we're kind of doing Be the Change, I don't know whether people will get a bit confused, or whether I'm not quite sure how to fit this in, because as Phoenix knows, I do the birds and the bees with the cabinet member for climate change in Swindon, and in fact I had the cabinet member for climate change for Wiltshire on the show yesterday, and he's going to come on fairly regularly, so we've got some influence there, you know, and I'm just trying to think how somehow could manage to go together. Do you get what I'm saying?
Tom, did you want to?
Sure, and I think that's wonderful. I mean, there's stuff already. I mean, that this is already happening, and I don't think you know. I think that there's not necessarily any need to, if it's already happening, necessarily replace it with a jump. I think hopefully maybe there are things in the jump that campaign you talked about could use. I don't know if the things that we talked, I've talked about the foundations, the toolkit, these things that actually help us make that change. I don't know if that's already in there. If so, you could just feed that in. It doesn't have to be a bit, what. As long as these things happen, who cares what name we put on it, right? Like,
oh, well, I'm so with you, Tom, on that. I'm always saying that. Don't care. The bees don't care what it's called, as long as it's there. You know, doesn't matter.
Exactly. So hopefully, if we, if any of this can be of use to you, even if you don't have to call it a jump or whatever, like then, like we can, whatever support we can offer, that would be wonderful.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks, Glynis. Anybody else got any questions? Any thoughts? Any ideas? Oh, Glynis again.
Sorry, I did have another idea. My friend and I, what we do is, I don't know whether you want to put this in, once a week we make a change. So, for example, not buying shampoo bars, for example, or try not to buy anything with plastic. Bit difficult. So it's once a month, maybe once a week. You just say, right, from now on, I'm going to do this. I'm going to buy this. And that gradually makes a change as well. Just an idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Glynis, because I think that's the way I do things, is I just do one little bit at a time, because I can't do the whole lot.
Every little bit added to another little bit makes a bigger bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Count the pennies and the pounds look after themselves. Okay. Has anybody else got any thoughts about how they want to? Oh, Sue.
Sorry. it was a question rather than a thought. It sounds really brilliant, and it'd be we're a long way off getting our CEC in place, but we do have what we call a pop-up green outreach hub once a month on a Saturday in town. So it's the sort of thing we potentially could look to introduce. But my question was more to do with, this has obviously come out of research. So how do you have funding, or how does it work from your, from the point of view of Jump, in terms of what's the resource behind it? How long is it going to be able to continue? Oh, that was to Tom. Oh,
Sure.
Could you hear me?
Sorry, did I interrupt you there?
Yeah, no, yeah. So did you hear Sue?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just about, yeah, how long is it going to be able to continue? If you've got like funding or resources behind it too?
Sure. So the Jump, we have a tiny bit of funding so far. Most of it's been organisations and individuals donating their time very generously. We've got a small bit of funding. We're looking at getting lots more funding so we can start doing stuff more comprehensively. But yeah, no, we tend to be around for the next, at least the next 3 or 4 years is our plan. And I meant to say that, if we wanted to do something in Bath, or any of you are thinking about stuff, or help doing an event or anything like that, we are around to be able to do that to some extent. So and provide materials and so on. But yeah, we have a little bit of funding. We're being set up as a charity. We're in the process at the moment of setting up as a charity. So.
And you're in Bristol quite a bit, aren't you, Tom? So
I could be over in Bath in 2 shakes of a stick.
So I'm just thinking, if Bath wanted to do something around it, it'd be quite easy for you to kind of help set up and plan all that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks, Sue. Anybody got any thoughts? I love the way David and Shirley's and what Ben have done are two quite different things, but then they're sort of collaborating. I'm working sort of, sharing it. It was lovely. And I did go to the Godalming event, and it was really Fran. Oh, you're muted.
I just love it because it's so clear, and it brings all those things I've been doing together very clearly, in a very upbeat. The graphics are lovely and upbeat, and here we are just starting on our journey for a CNC, but here we have got the program to put into it, so it's great. We're working on the receptacle, and now we've got the program to go in. So thank you so much, Tom. Brilliant.
Lovely. Thanks, Fran. Okay. Anybody else got any more questions or thoughts or ideas or anything they wanted to share? Otherwise, we'll just go to checkout, and I will stop. Oh, Fiona's. We can't see you. Oh, there we can now.
No, I'm here now. Sorry about earlier. Yeah. So the question was just with the Godalming event. Did you seem to be reaching beyond the normal? So.
Oh, sorry, I've muted.
I'm on mute now. Did you hear that question?
Yes, I thought. Do you know, it's hot? Well, I think we did, because of our position. We had a lovely position, which is a thoroughfare from the high street through to the car park, and we had some stalls on the high street. So I think we did. Whether they are the ones that came and spoke to us, I wasn't sure. But not take the jump. Extinction Rebellion did the change the system one, and they decided not to go for the non-violent direct action. They went for the switches that they talk about in the Take the Jump material, like changing your bank account, and they did some lovely work. And people were shocked about the banks, because they had all the high street banks listed by one of the ethical consumer type, and people were surprised. So people who came to talk to them didn't know what. They weren't saying, oh yeah, well, I'm with Triodos. They were saying, oh my God, look at my bank. So that's the sort of anecdotal feedback that we have. And I'm sure there were a few people who walked past who wish they didn't have to walk through there, because there was no escape. David?
And I think we had one of the Dress Fresh stall. We had huge amounts of clothes that we were giving away. And I think that drew a fair number of people in, just on the whole novelty of the fact you could just go and take it away. People were quite surprised. And because none of us, we weren't set up in any way, and almost quite deliberately, to take donations or anything. We just say, no, we don't want any donation or anything. Just if you like it, just take it away with you. So I think that, from what I understood from the people that ran that stall, that did draw in people because of the clothes that were there, but also then the unusualness of it as well. So that was good.
People actually sharing things.
Actually, we've had what we call a free shop here in Swindon for some years now. So, and it's very popular. People bring in like about 6, I can't remember, 6 pieces, and they can take 6 pieces basically. So you're recycling. It's great stuff. Good fun.
Good thing.
Maybe just one really quick thing to add on that reaching other audiences. The thing that we're really this is what we're focusing on massively at the moment. One of them, a really important part is engaging actively, proactively in advance community spokespeople and leaders from different communities, and having those. So, we're working on a big Instagram campaign at the moment where we're using young people from like the gym movement, and then young black rappers and all sorts, to take the jump and then do that online and show, so people who are not the usual suspects as a way of being spokespeople for it, I think is really important for reaching those other audiences.
Fran.
Yes, and it strikes me, when you have something like that, the clothes store, that opportunity to get into a conversation and try and find out what the person's skills and abilities are, so that you can find a way of showing them how they can contribute, valuing them, so that you can draw them in, and they're not just being given something. They know that they have something they can contribute if they want to,
Yeah, that's a good point, Fran. So they're not feeling like, I just on the Dress Fresh thing. Next week we've got Louise coming from Sharewear, which is actually a clothing bank organisation, and she links up with like the GPs, social services, job centres, and gets people to refer. So people who would not normally engage with the climate stuff because they just haven't got the time, but actually a lot of the resources, a lot of the things that you're talking about in the jump, and a lot of the things that we need to do for sustainability are really useful for people in those sorts of situations. A lot of the sort of libraries of things and sharing economy and those sorts of ideas. And she's looking at having her things within climate emergency centres. So it's a really good way then to have people referred. They can come in and they can also then start, oh, look, a library of things. I can come borrow something when I need it instead of trying to find the money. So if people want to come along, it's a great way to get, and hers, it's clothes that would have been thrown out from organisations, companies, clothes shops, ending up.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. They just throw it out at the end of the season. I'm not going to go there. Okay, guys. Thank you very much, Tom and David and Shirley and Ben, for coming along. I think it's just a really nice way of thinking about starting to plan and organise what does it look like, and it's such a positive way of doing things and covers it all really nicely. And thank you for coming and showing us what you're doing. Shall we do some checkouts? For a checkout? Okay, I'm going to ask Phoenix to check out because